All right, we are up and rolling now. We have a few more minutes before the talk begins, and I already see some of our participants rolling in. So welcome for anyone who's logging on now and opening up their screen again. We have Sonya Yong James here with us tonight. We've got more attendees rolling in, and so as we say hello to each of you, good evening. Thanks for joining us. In a few minutes after we have most of our attendees here, we will go ahead and introduce Sonya and her work, talk a little bit about her background and her experience as an artist. Before we do that, as we have a few minutes, as our attendees continue to roll in and log on, I want to encourage all of you to visit the Wiregrass Museum of Art's website. That's at wiregrassmuseum.org. There you'll find our current and upcoming exhibitions, including one that we are really excited about, which is our biennial. So B22 Wiregrass Biennial. The list of selected artists has been announced this week, and so you'll be able to see more about that exhibition on the website. If you look at our calendar and our happenings page, you'll also be able to see all of our upcoming artist workshops, studio classes, special events that we have going on. So I encourage all of you, if you're interested in what's happening at the Wiregrass Museum of Art, visit the website, check us out, become a member, and support the work going on there. So we have a few more attendees who are logging on for the evening. We've got one more minute until it's actually 6 p.m. So we'll give everybody a little bit of time to jump on before we get started. Speaking about our website, we also are very active on our social media feeds. So if you are on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or even TikTok, you can find the museum there. We have given into TikTok at last, and we've got some really fun videos there featuring our teen council, featuring the field trips that come to the museum, and you get to see the really fun side of what's happening every day at the Wiregrass Museum of Art. All right, it's officially 6 p.m. So I want to say welcome to everyone who is joining us this evening, wherever you are. We have registrants from all across the Southeast and the US to hear from Sonya Yong James tonight. Our virtual artists talks are a great place where you can enjoy getting to know an artist from the comfort of your home. And so we welcome everyone who's logged on and who is joining us tonight. Sonya will be presenting images of her work and of inspirations. She will be talking about The Eye of a Needle, the exhibition that is currently on display at the Wiregrass Museum of Art. But before she starts presenting, I'd like to take some time to introduce her, to talk about her experience as an artist and her work. So if you'll give me just a few moments, I'll read that now and we can learn together about Sonya. Sonya Yong James is a multidisciplinary artist that works primarily with fiber materials such as thread and cloth to create magnificent sculpture installations. She works with these materials because she is drawn to the references that they hold, such as mending, repairing, and connecting. She believes these ubiquitous materials are central to the human experience, and she's intrigued by the idea of a single thread becoming warp and weft, capable of forming something whole. Her current work also speaks to her fascination and reverence for the natural world. Sonya is interested in narratives that speak collectively to shared mythologies and folktales. And she says these once familiar stories are then fragmented and conflated with one another to form new clusters of meaning and association. Textiles are also the instruments of both female domestic culture and universal production. She seeks to join together the points where these stories and systems overlap and where sources of sexuality, memory, and death construct meaningful relationships and dialogue. Sonya lives and works and is joining us tonight from Atlanta, Georgia. She received a Bachelor of Fine Arts in printmaking from Georgia State University, where she focused on etching and sculpture. She has exhibited nationally and internationally for the past 20 years and has received several grants, awards, and residencies along the way, including the Artadia Award in 2019 and the IDEA Capital Antonori Grant in 2021. Her work is held in numerous corporate and private collections, including art in embassies in Mauritania, Africa. She has been exhibited in galleries and museums locally and regionally, like the Museum of Contemporary Art of Georgia, Atlanta Contemporary, Ogden Museum of Southern Art, Albany Museum of Art, and the Zuckerman Museum of Art. She was formerly a resident at the Studio Artist Program at Atlanta Contemporary, and she is represented by White Space Gallery. And of course, if you're in the Wiregrass region, you know that her exhibition, Sonya Yong James, The Eye of a Needle, is currently on display at the Wiregrass Museum of Art in downtown Dothan until June 25th. This exhibition was curated by Tina Ruggieri and was organized by the Abroms Engel Institute for the Visual Arts at the University of Alabama at Birmingham. And so from your seats at home tonight, I hope you're giving a little round of applause or snapped fingers, whatever you'd like to do from afar to welcome Sonya. We've been so grateful to have her in our galleries in person and now with us again so that we can learn from her. So Sonya, I'm going to pass it over to you. I'll take my screen down. And I want to say as one more note to anyone joining us tonight, you can ask Sonya questions at the end of her presentation. So feel free during this time to type your question into the Q&A box. And I will help to moderate those at the end. But as you're learning and those questions come up in your mind, go ahead and get those down. So Sonya, thank you again for being here with us tonight, and we'll pass it over to you.
Okay, thank you so much for the introduction. I appreciate that. And I also want to thank Dana and everyone at Wiregrass Museum of Art for their hard work in putting the exhibition together. It looks really beautiful, and I'm very pleased and very happy to have the show travel there. And again, of course, thank you to Tina Ruggieri and John Fields at Ava. The experience working with them and then the show traveling to another place in Alabama has been a really wonderful one. And I've been really excited to share the work with everyone. So, yes, thank you so much for tuning in. I thought I would start the talk by showing very rapidly many images of things that I've been looking at right now. This might be a way for just kind of to serve a way to show you what I'm kind of interested in and what I find maybe inspiring. This sort of thing can change daily and weekly. Oftentimes, I might not even look at art. It might just be, I mean, it could be anything really. It could pastoral or sometimes films, books, words. That's not very visually compelling though. So I've sort of collected together some images of things that I find interesting. And some of these things are interesting to me and inform my work right now. And some of the things that I'm looking at and will show you, particularly the little film capsules, are perennial favorites. This is actually at the cemetery here in Atlanta, the Oakland Cemetery, which I found very amusing. This is from a documentary called Coda of Ryuichi Sakamoto. He is one of my favorite composers and sound artists. I first discovered his work when I saw the Bernardo Bertolucci film The Last Emperor in 1987, which I was lucky to see in the theater. And I have followed his sound and his compositions ever since. And this is just a snippet of him talking about what it means to collect sound.
に囲まれているわけですけど、まあ普通はそういうもの音楽としては聞いてないんですけども、よく聞くととても面白いんですよ。音楽的にも面白いし、そういうものも自分の音楽の一部として取り込みたいという気持ちは強いですね。楽器の音もそれから外界の音も一緒になってるような、もっと何かその根底に一体となった音響っていうのかなは、まあ今聞いてみたいという気持ちは。
This is a film by one of my favorite directors, Wim Wenders. He was a major figure in the new German cinema. And I saw this as well when I was a teenager. Again, a perennial favorite. And I come back to this film time and time again.
Als das Kind war das die Zeit der folgenden Fragen. Warum bin ich und warum nicht du? Warum bin ich hier und warum nicht dort? Wann begann die Zeit und wo endet der Raum? Ist das Leben unter der Sonne nicht bloß ein Traum? Ist, was ich sehe und höre und rieche, nicht bloß der Schein einer Welt vor der Welt? Gibt es tatsächlich das Böse und Leute, die wirklich die Bösen sind? Wie kann es sein, dass ich der Ich bin, bevor ich wurde, nicht wahr? Und dass einmal ich, der ich bin, nicht mehr der ich bin, sein werde?
Oh, I think I'll stop really quick just to talk about this. I found this very recently. This was a National Geographic documentary. This right here is an Italian recycling factory. I just want to talk about it really quick because I think to use textiles and to do a lot of dyeing like I do, uh, it's really important to acknowledge the fact that textile production now, industrial textile production is extremely it can be very wasteful and it can be a real contribution to a lot of pollution. And what I'm seeing now lately that's been very exciting to me is the idea of recycling a lot of cloth, fiber, and clothing. It's been happening for centuries, but it's really starting to really pick up and be very popular. And I just thought I would talk about it too because I feel that in my new work, a new body of work that I'm developing right now, I'm going to be using primarily recycled textiles. I do that anyway. I call it harvesting. I mean, I suppose some people might say cannibalizing, but oftentimes with my work and with my sculptures, I will harvest materials from old pieces and then make them into new things. And the new work, I found some textile mills here in the United States where they take a lot of loom waste, and I have 100 pounds of cotton thread waste that's on its way to me, and I'm really interested in incorporating that into my practice in the new work. And just kind of interesting too, just a little side note. I find it really interesting too and fascinating how textile terms really have found their way into our language. Um, this actually is called shoddy. Shoddy is actually, well, it started in the early 1800s, and shoddy was a name given to a new material made from reclaimed wool. And that's exactly what's happening right here in this photograph. This is an Italian factory, they're reclaiming old wool, and it will be completely ground down and recycled and made into new fabric. It's one of the earliest forms of industrial recycling. I think all of us probably have a sweater at one time when you look at the label inside and it says 100% virgin wool. That's where that comes from. And also too, things like spin a tail, dyed in the wool, hanging by a thread, things that we might use in our language every day, I think is interesting because a lot of it is textile related. And also too, 85% of textiles goes into landfills. Only 15% of it gets donated. So yeah, it's just something that I've been thinking about lately.
Are you lost? Because we don't know when we will die, we get to think of life as an inexhaustible well. Yet everything happens only a certain number of times, and a very small number, really. How many more times will you remember a certain afternoon of your childhood? Some afternoon that's so deeply a part of your being that you can't even conceive of your life without it. Perhaps 4 or 5 times more, perhaps not even that. How many more times will you watch the full moon rise? Perhaps 20. And yet it all seems limitless.
So a couple of real quick pictures too. A part of my practice is very much dyeing and a lot of natural dyeing. Right now I'm currently doing a very large project where I am dyeing 50, I have dyed 50 yards of cotton with indigo. And I also use a lot of other natural dyes and also cochineal. I have a couple of real quick pictures, and then right after that, I'll dive into the new work that has been created in the past couple of years that's in the show, along with a couple of other past works as well. I thought I would actually kind of start with this one question. I'm often asked the same question: why textiles? Um, I know in the introduction, a bit of that was explained why. And I know that a lot of people kind of want to imagine what that kind of history with me might possibly be. Did I grow up in an environment where textiles or fiber loomed large or played an important part in my formative years as a child? Yes, but that's not precisely true. In some ways, it is, though. There were the silk hanbok dresses that my mother brought home from Korea, and the silk flowers that she and I would make for money when I was a child. I do have those emotional associations with the material silk, but my textile explorations originated in wonder. As I have researched the subject, I have been repeatedly struck by the fundamental technology textiles represent, what world-shaking consequences they've had, and how remarkable much of their history is. Exploring the textile medium introduced me to amazing natural phenomena like the magical chemistry of indigo and the legacy of cotton around the world. In the 16th century, one of the world's most precious commodities was cochineal, a small bug that grows on cactus in Mexico and became a legendary red dye treasured by the ancient Aztecs. Shipped to Europe, the dye created a sensation, producing the brightest, strongest red the world has ever seen. To follow the tale of 3 centuries of cochineal is to learn a tale of pirates, explorers, alchemists, scientists, and spies. I am really fascinated with the history of anything, of textiles, particularly in its provenance. When you think about that's cochineal, I'm very excited. I'm hoping to go to Oaxaca and the Yucatan later this year so I can actually see cochineal being harvested on cactus. I find it really fascinating, the history and where things actually come from. If you think of, say, the cardinal red of robes of the Catholic Church, that was originally from cochineal insects 400 years ago. Hence the pirates. It was actually more valuable than gold was at one time. Many questions arise from human universals. Human beings share the need for protection, the drive for status, and the pleasures of endowment. We are tool-making, problem-solving animals and social sensory creatures. Cloth embodies all these characteristics. The story of textiles encompasses beauty and genius, excess and cruelty, social hierarchies, peaceful trade, and savage wars. This heritage does not belong to a single nation, race, or culture, or to a single time or place. The story of textiles is not a male story or a female story, not a European, African, Asian, or American story. It is all of these, cumulative and shared, a human story, a tapestry woven from countless different threads. Although I'm drawn to the history and the stories behind cloth and textiles, my true draw to the medium is actually emotional and visceral. Cloth is always touching us. Cloth and fiber, it holds the gift of memory, particularly in our clothes. Textile art can provoke a desire to touch, thus awakening multiple senses at once. Color and texture can be heard like a sound, while the desire to experience textiles by physically touching it is using the eyes of the skin. When I present my work and develop my work, I am interested in developing and utilizing all of the senses sort of working together. And as you know, at AVA, in past work, in past exhibits, and at the show at Wiregrass, there is a sound component as well. Let's see. So more dyeing with indigo. Here is the cochineal bug nests on the cactus being collected. Really am dying to see this in person. Okay, here is the first piece. The title of this piece says, I know a song of the colors where I live. Does it know a song of me? And this is a landscape and a memoriam with references to Victorian Southern symbolism. Landscape representations in Western painting and Asian art go back over 1,000 years. The recognition of a spiritual element in landscape art is ever present in East Asian art and is influenced by Taoism. Romanticism was introduced to the representation of the landscape in the mid-19th century in the West. And I had shown some landscape for pastoral sort of paintings that are Western and Eastern too, at the very beginning of the inspiration shots. I find it interesting that landscape has always been with us as human beings for millennia, and artists too to this day. We're still making landscapes. And I suppose you could argue that they're self-portraits, actually. This sculpture was actually specifically created for a Victorian carriage house in Atlanta, Georgia. The Victorian era was the age of the flower garden, and weeping willows are presented here. This landscape I created was at a time of mourning for myself, and there are woven pieces of horsehair and human hair, my own hair and other people's hair, that's in the sculpture. If you're familiar with it, Victorian mourning jewelry that was very popular at the time when this carriage house and this house was built in Inman Park in Atlanta, is the weaving of human hair and horsehair, which I find fascinating, that informs some of my work. See if I can get to a detail. Sorry. I also use a lot of clay in my work as well. And this is all hand-dyed yarn. I believe this piece is about 13 feet wide. When I do landscapes, I find it interesting to make it interact with the human scale as you stand in front of it. There's a Southern Gothic influence. It reflects on my experience as a lifelong Southerner, while other elements in the work reflect my Asian heritage. To live in the American South is to experience its vibrant heritage and dark corners too. This sculpture seeks to evoke local folklore, oral history, and traces of the region's historical scars. I love the color black. The color black in Asian culture is completely the opposite of what it is in the West. The color black, and of course in this work, corresponds to the idea of water and is considered to be a neutral color in Asian culture. It's the color of heaven. It symbolizes the northern and western sky. This color represents immortality, knowledge, stability, and power. Black, unlike the color white, is not the color of mourning, but the color of life. And I like to contrast these things and embrace that. This in culture and symbolism, if I can, in my work. I feel like it's a real accurate reflection of my experience as an Asian living and growing up in the Deep South. Also, whenever you think about the color black too, think of sumi ink too. That's always in the calligraphy in Asian paintings and work too. That it really does literally mean water and life. Going on to this piece too, I did this specifically for this space. I really love to work that way, to see a building, to see a space and respond to it. And this is a piece that I named Phantom Threads. This was created a couple of years ago. And what I've been using a lot of for the past, I think about 5-6 years now, are vintage bed sheets. Initially that was really out of necessity. Fabric is kind of expensive, and then I realized I had a lot of textiles again laying around that I no longer used, that were old, and instead of throwing them out, I started to use them. And then it also really allowed me a chance to really reflect on what a bed sheet and what these old textiles really are. This is a sculpture that it hung from the ceiling in an old abandoned building. It is 18 feet long and I believe about 12-13 feet wide. It has cast cement, plaster, nylon, paper yarn. I have bones from past animals, ashes, sisal. There's wool felt, cotton rope, even a cast snake. um, and again, I'm very interested in folklore and folk tales too, and I find that very interesting. It's something that we again have always had as human beings for centuries, and we still think about. And this piece was inspired and informed by the Korean folklore of female ghosts that inhabit abandoned buildings. And it's the idea of, and I'm not pronouncing this correctly. If you're Korean, I apologize. Guisin, I think, is maybe close to how you pronounce it. They're spirits, they're female spirits that inhabit empty spaces, and they are there until she completes a task that she feels has been left undone while she lived. Again, I find it really interesting and fascinating, the strength and the belief that so many Koreans have in ghosts. It endlessly fascinates me. And just a little background, I'm actually half Korean. I'm half Korean, half Irish. I was born in Knoxville, Tennessee. And I've lived in Atlanta pretty much my whole entire life. And this piece is sort of an elegy of sorts, too. Just for the places in Atlanta where I live that will no longer exist, as the landscape, here is constantly changing. And some of the walls in this building too were pre-Civil War, and the building has been torn down, and new condos are being built as we speak. Unfortunately, yes, as anywhere, there's massive urban gentrification everywhere. But also too, when I think about it, also this installation might also be just a personal rumination. Reflecting a fear of running out of time that a mortal woman such as myself might feel. And I believe in ghosts too. I've seen them. This also gives me a chance too to kind of further talk about the bed sheets. Really, I've been collecting a lot of bed sheets, and I will continue to use this material. I think it's really charged. It's a common material, but I often use it. It's reclaimed and it's repurposed. These vintage bed sheets. I find them everywhere. You'll find them everywhere. I think every 2 months I'll clear out every Goodwill and Salvation Army in the Metro Atlanta area. You can find beautiful sheets, and then you get strange ones too. You can see like stamps from hospitals and things. They all have histories for sure. But I believe bed sheets are silent witnesses to many natural processes in life, such as birth, puberty, pleasure, disease, decay, and death. The bedsheet can become a material on which to literally or metaphorically write our meanings and messages to the world. Bedsheets carry metaphors of grief and loss to me. And also going back, I could go back a few. These were a few hundred pairs of hose that I cast plaster in to create this sort of movement and this kind of heavy gravity, and I feel like this sculpture further represents the female form with the use of those hose that have, and the inevitable and the idea of inevitable age by the use of the nylon casting with the hundreds of pounds of plaster. This thing just weighed a phenomenal amount. The thing about this piece too, again, like I said, I like to reuse, repurpose, and harvest old work. So instead of this work coming down, since it was a temporary installation and just existing in boxes and storage, it went on and became something else. Phantom Threads became Spirit is a Bone. So the ghost was transformed into a landscape. And this is what this sculpture is called. Spirit is a Bone. It measures 6 feet by 24 feet. And I was asked to create a particular sculpture for the Ogden Museum of Southern Art, for this one particular wall for a group show. And as it would be, I did this piece when everything began to shut down at the end of 2019, but at the bulk of the spring of 2020. So I actually completed this during the spring of 2020. And as you can see, so the color here is white, the opposite of the black piece that I just showed previously. And the piece is inspired by the landscape of South Louisiana, New Orleans. I feel like it feels very, very swampy. And of course, the choice of color is informed by the narrative of the piece. And the color too, again, it references Asian culture's use of white. White is the color of mourning in Asia. I think that's an interesting contrast. White, of course, we have associations of the color can maybe mean purity, but it is devoid of color, where you have really black having all of the colors together. So this is a piece about mourning and grief. And sort of what I was experiencing throughout the whole entire time by myself in the studio, while everything was happening around me and us. Yeah, and I use this I use this process, this sort of very laborious, repetitive process and work as an act of emotional repair. And at the time when I created this was a grieving. I've had a lot of loss in my life in the past few years, and just even recently, as of a couple months ago. And so I was grieving whenever I made this piece, and I was grieving, those that were lost in this horrific, global pandemic, and also all of the intense, police violence and all the violence that's been happening, for centuries really, but indeed for the past few years. And animals have been showing up in my work since about 2018. The use of these small white animal figures. There's I don't know if I think I have a photograph of it. There's an owl. There are little sculptures of like my dogs and wolves and spiders and this wolf right here. It speaks not only to natural systems of ecology, but also I feel like it kind of references the freedom of wildlife to roam, while we stayed at home in isolation in 2020 largely. And again, the wolf is a reoccurring theme in my sculptures and represents a reincarnation of spirit. That's very prevalent in some Asian cultures and definitely in Native American. My work does tend to be formally abstract, but I have been introducing a little bit more narrative elements into the sculptures, and I feel like this work kind of speaks directly to this moment and to this place, particularly 2 years ago, and it's also, of course, referencing the history of landscape. There's the Hegel philosophy in the title of Spirit is a Bone, and of course ecology and my own emotional state when this was made. Ah, there we go. Yes, there's the owl. I even have jars of like some of my dog ashes in it. I thought I would play a real quick snippet of the sound that accompanies the show. That was a collaboration with another artist, J.D. Walsh. I met him at the Atlanta Contemporary when we were both residents there. And he's a phenomenal visual artist, but he's an incredible musician as well. And I love to do collaborative work with other artists. They help me see in different ways. And he can do the things that I can't do. And so he made a composition for the work in 4 different movements, and I collected sounds that were around me at the time. It could be anything from the train and the railroad tracks behind the studio, the sound of the loom, and things like that. And then often I will just hand it off to the other artists and sort of I can maybe sort of have some ideas about it. But I kind of get out of the way and let JG do the composition. And that's something that it was a really great experience. I initially started making sure that I did a lot of sound collaborative work in my solo exhibition starting in 2019, which now I guess has been about 4 years ago. So I can't even really see not having sound in my work anymore. And in fact, sort of even going back and reversing even further, when I was a child, I started playing the piano and the violin when I was 5 years old. And so I really honestly thought that I would be a musician. Actually, I really did. And then I realized that I saw things more than I actually hear things. And so I thought, well, the most I will ever be as a musician will be classically trained. You know, if I can even, get to that point where I can be that good. And I mean, I did play for long enough to love and fall in love with, Debussy, playing him, Beethoven, Mozart, and that sort of thing. But I knew that that was probably all that I would do. And writing music at the time, of course, I was a teenager. I was 15 years old. It seemed very laborious to me, where painting did not. So I really kind of found a home then. So most people don't really know that actually the idea and my love, my interest in sound and music comes from those formative years as a child, when I was 5 years old, growing up in Stone Mountain, Georgia. But that did lead me to be a painter, but then I ended up getting a degree in printmaking, and then I found textiles. It's all very interdisciplinary, really. And sound is just so important to me. What's the word exactly? Synthesis? What is that? There is a word when you when your faculties sort of cross over. I have sort of a mild form of that. I have some friends that have very, very strong. For instance, I can show a friend of mine, Junko, a particular color. Artists that paint will know it, like the Eve's blue, and she'll say to me, "Oh, Sonya, that's E minor." I mean, she'll actually literally hear the note E minor when she sees that particular blue. I do that to a mild sort of way. It does kind of cross over a little bit. More, I have human beings that I know, people that I know and care about that I've known for a while. When I think of them, I actually first think of them in color. And just talking about sound, just really quick again, I just really feel like there's a real body of knowledge in sound that's just completely different than the visual. And I'm in the process of doing 2 collaborations right now with another sound artist that I'm excited about, that hopefully will be used in a new installation coming up in the next year. So when I'm talking about sound, it gives me the chance to actually talk about silence. This is a piece that was created a couple of years ago. It's called "The Silence Between Us." And I'll read real quick from my notes about silence now that I've said how I feel about sound. I believe that silence takes shape and form. Is silence an absence or a presence? Is it a positive space or a negative space? Silence is still, and yet it can be the loudest sound of all. It can center us on the present, and it can also take us far away from it. The most intense yearning or mourning can happen during this most mysterious of the untouchable. Is silence calming, or does it inspire unease? Is it nothing or something? Empty or full? If I were to create a work about silence, should it be a blank wall or full of texture? Okay, jumping over really quick to this one. This is called 100 Blossoms and the Sweetest Scent. I was asked for the project wall of the Zuckerman Museum of Art to create a piece. I I wish I had thought about putting photographs in the presentation. I turned my 700 square foot studio at the Contemporary into one large loom. All the walls had had a tapestry loom that I had installed on each wall, and then at the location, I sewed and pieced it all together. Let me show some detailed photographs here. Again, a lot of this sort of weeping gravity sort of thing, this hose that reference the female form. We have animals in here as well. And this too, I cleared out every single Salvation Army and Goodwill in Atlanta. This whole entire piece is about 18 feet by 20 feet, and it's all hand-dyed bed sheets, and that's what I wove it with. So it's hand-dyed bed sheets, and it's a lot of found objects. There's even a fireman's red axe in there, a lot of silk flowers that I painted. And this is embedded with the folktale of Little Red Riding Hood and the Greek myth of Persephone. Get back to that really quick. Pictures of the flowers. Although different stories, there are numerous similarities between them, actually. I find really interesting the contrast. Both girls, they were both girls in these tales. They're different, but they were both picking flowers, and both were described as being abducted. Both stories are often referred to as seasonal myths and an allegory of opposite forces. This work seeks to bring together archetypical opposites through which it explores the boundaries of culture and the role of storytelling, and especially what it means to be a man or a woman. The girl and a wolf inhabit a place, call it the forest or call it the human psyche, where the spectrum of human stories converge and where their social and cultural meanings have evolved and have changed with time. And, I asked myself, and I think about it, and other artists and writers, musicians, still go back to really sort of this history, this 400 years of fairy tale history. And the questions still remain, don't they? Why even after all of these different iterations? Because they keep, there's an evolution with these tales. They change over the past few hundred years. But why are fairy tales still relevant? And I've, something that I've really kind of thought about as well. Why do we keep going back to it? The tale of Persephone, Greek myth, which keeps coming back in my work and in other people's work as well. How have they stood the test of time, and why are they still so popular? I think we can go into a lot of different theory about it, but I really feel like at the very end, the truth is, no matter what the version is, and whatever the tale or the fairy tale is, it really kind of, as human beings, it helps reinstate our belief that good will always prevail over evil. And just really quick to wrap up, some just real quick thoughts about this piece. It's sometimes as an artist, and no other artist would be able to agree, you might not really understand why you're making things while you're making it, and it's not until maybe after you finish making it and it's hung, or maybe sometimes years later you can, and in retrospect, understand why you made something. And and I realized that I was making this at the height of the women's marches. So that must have been something that was really very much in my psyche and something that I was really thinking about. And also, since I've talked about color a bit and why I choose color, a lot of people want to know why. Why black? Why white? Well, why red? Obviously, Little Red Riding Hood. And I know Persephone is definitely associated with red and with the pomegranate, the fruit pomegranate, and with the depths of Hades and hell. But also, too, whenever you can think of color in different cultures, I think that's really interesting. Red is a very popular color in Asian culture, particularly in Chinese culture, extremely auspicious. So in the new year, of course, everyone decks their houses and themselves in red. It symbolizes luck, joy, happiness, celebration, vitality, even fertility. And in India, actually, it symbolizes purity. But it's interesting, again, crossing over to the West, and in Western countries and culture, it evokes, red evokes excitement, danger, urgency, and even love. I go back to red a lot. I really like the color red. This is a complicated piece that I still actually do not know how I feel about it. It was probably one of the hardest pieces that I've ever made, in the sense that the color was very challenging. This is a piece that was made for the project wall. I was asked to make a sculpture for the project wall, the Atlanta Contemporary, and this was fairly recent, about a year ago. The name of this piece, and I think it's about 4 feet by 13 feet. The name of the piece is I Eat the Stars. I go in and out of intense love with the color, and before I made this piece, fell in love with the color magenta. I just couldn't stand it. I couldn't stop myself. And I don't know how to explain it exactly. You sometimes you just can't even really explain why you're drawn to a color and why you love it so deeply. And you can't even, I mean, it's no easier to explain that than it is to say that how you can be incredibly drawn to another human being or anything else for that matter in the world. For the longest time when I was out in the world and in nature, I chased that color around. I tried to dye it. It took a really long time, for years and for years. But in this summer of 2020, I got incredibly ill, where I had 104-degree fever for about a week. And I didn't really, quite honestly, I was so ill, it lasted for almost a month. And I did not know if I was going to make it. But I will say this, that when I was that ill, I had these amazing, amazing dreams of these landscapes and this dense forest. And it was all in this color magenta. And instead of like really being afraid of dying or anything like that, it was really kind of a happy and calm experience. It was very mysterious and strange to me, but it was very happy and calm. And I don't know why. Was it because this color magenta had been my friend for a couple of years. I don't really know, but I decided that I wanted to make this sculpture that sort of recreated that experience. It was also, those are small little, I believe they're called button gourds. There's probably 12 different colors of hand-dyed magenta in this piece. And this is sort of, again, something that's been reoccurring in the past couple of years, the weeping willow, the sort of landscape. I think what I found really challenging about this piece and confusing about it was that it was really alarming and upsetting to stand in front of this. It was hard to stand in front of it because the color is so bright. It hurts. It would make you dizzy and really confuse you. And you could look at this piece, and I did for a really long time when I made it, for sure, and then look away, and all you would see is green. It's a complicated color. And you might also actually be surprised to learn that magenta is one of the only three true primaries. It's not red. This color does not exist in nature. There's no wavelength of light that is magenta in the visible spectrum. It is merely the way our brains interpret a mixture of red and blue light. The perception of magenta and all red-violet hues is completely in our mind. It's interesting to note that many flowers in nature have developed the magenta coloration to lure insects and birds. So there must be some evolutionary preference for this color, since it only exists in the brain of the animal that perceives it. I am in love with a color that does not exist in the world, but exists inside of me. It's a confounding realization, actually. And yes, it would bring on feelings of confusion and vertigo. So yes, this is the first sculpture that I've ever done where I try to influence the viewer physically with the effect of a disorienting and intense color. I know I'm starting to kind of go over in time, so I'll really try to pick it up and speed it up. I do apologize. Entanglement. This is 25 pounds of hand-dyed wolf felt. And let's see. Yes. I love wool felt. It's an ancient material. It's the oldest textile in the world. It's thought to be at least 8,000 years old. I love it because it's disorderly, it's entropic, and it's full of trapped energy. And to me, the appeal of felt is its connection to the earth and to the living animals that they come from. When you touch this and work with this, you are literally feeling centuries of historic tradition. You know, and it's in touch with the past, and it's very innovative. We're still using it today, and has lots of reinterpretations. It's and I love wool felts. It's very primordial to me as well. Definitely. Really quickly too, one material that I use a lot of is horsehair. I don't think I'll ever tire of using horsehair. 20 years ago, I used a lot of my own hair and other people's hair. I do some of that a little bit still, but I'm very drawn to horsehair. And this again was created especially for an exhibit that took place in a 19th century Victorian carriage house that is now White Space Gallery in Atlanta, Georgia. Also, you probably might not realize it too. I mean, we've always, for a lot of obvious reasons, relied on horses. That's what made us be able to expand and travel and go to different places and migrate to different places, was because of horses. But you can even see, even to this day, the ancient traditions of wigs. The barristers, the lawyers in London and Britain, they still wear those white wigs. Those are made out of horsehair. We obviously use synthetic hair for wigs now, but they're still in use. There's a lot to probably say about the history of horses and the sort of synergy and the relationship that human beings have with them. But I think I'll just say something really quick and go through the last few slides about it. It really, to me, I grew up in Stone Mountain, Georgia, and honestly, my draw to horsehair is really about a childhood memory. I used to pass through this like wooded area. I had no idea what it was, but I passed this property that had all these peacocks, these ducks, and these horses. And I was on the way to the swimming pool or the little ball field where we would go play as children, me and my brother with our friends. And what I really, then I realized that when I passed by it, I was passing by the headquarters of the Ku Klux Klan. And so I passed by there almost every day. And as a child, it just scared me to death when I realized who they were. Because we moved to Stone Mountain when I was 5 years old. But I couldn't stand it. I had to do it. So at any time that I could, I would go over there and sneak apples to the horses. So afraid that I was going to get caught. So I don't know. For me, this is horsehair and horses. To me, it's just like this nostalgic, actually, memory. Memory is important to me in my work, and reminds me of sort of that experience. And you know, even to this day, although I don't really get to do it now, one of my favorite sensations in the world are horse lips on the palm of my hand. Love that very much. And this also too is really, you can think of this piece and the other horsehair pieces is almost like a human timeline sort of thing, about age and time mostly. Okay, the very last piece. This is the piece that just recently made. I'll talk about it just real quick. I made it especially for the exhibition, and I'm excited about this piece. Spider Woman. There's a gourd. These are all hand-painted pieces of canvas, hand-dyed wool thread, and this is all sewn shoelaces that made this web. Oh, horsehair. I always sneak horsehair in whenever I can. Also, this allows me to play with the ideas that I love very much. Again, the reoccurring themes of myth. Webs in the myth of the Spider Woman has existed across myriad different cultures for millennia. From the tale of the Greek spider woman Arachne, whose overconfidence of her skill in weaving led to her tragic downfall, to the stories across Asia, Europe, Egypt, and the Native Americans of a mother that protects. The spider is a symbol of the ability to weave and to create something from one's own body, just as spiders make silk. I am interested in how this ancient tale can correspond with today and the modern age. The modern web, the internet, has fundamentally transformed the way we communicate and think. Over the past 2 decades, we now see the world as an infinite web, a large weaving of ideas and information. Connecting is at the heart of ancient and modern life. The landscape and the ways we achieve that today have changed tremendously. Although we are hyper interconnected, isolation as a species has become prevalent. This connectedness has helped us remain in communication these past 2 years, but has also been the source of a life-threatening infection. In reflection of all these ideas, Spider Woman still remains a mother, a teacher, a connector, and a totem of the protector of health. And that's about it. I'll just conclude with just a couple of things. I came across this somewhat recently, about a month ago, and I just thought it was really incredibly delightful. I think that sometimes if you can look at really new, like art that's new media work, and then my work, if you give it a cursory glance, you'll, oh, those are very, very remote sort of things. Nothing could be, there's nothing in common. They have nothing in common. But in fact, actually, if you give it a deeper look, they actually have so much in common with each other. I use ancient craft and ancient language. Actually, this knotting, nets and webs, that's an ancient craft for sure. We're still finding preserved nets that we used to fish with in mud from 8,000, 5,000 years ago. That's like from Stone Age societies. And with that, also weaving, warp and weft, knitting. These are all binary operations. These are two things that create something whole. And all you have to think about is binary and computers. They're doing the same thing. I use ancient craft, computers that uses new language and new craft. And I find those two correlations, I find that really interesting and something that I really want to explore a little bit more in the future. And to just end it, I came across this. You might already know this. I didn't know this until recently, a couple of years ago. But did you know that it was a weaving that took us to the moon? I had no idea. The Apollo, it was the Apollo, the computer was hand-woven, actually. And so were the tires, actually. The tires that landed on the moon were actually hand-woven with piano wire. That helped with landing on something that only had 100, like a sixth of the gravity as the Earth does. And then whenever the Apollo spacecraft floated back down to the Pacific Ocean, on those 3 distinctive orange and white parachutes, they measured about 83 feet across and 7,200 square feet of material. I mean, that's like the size of 2 decent sized large houses. All of that sewing for those parachutes was done by hand. That was done by women on black Singer sewing machines in a factory. Each of those chutes required 2 million individual stitches to assemble. And again, the computer that took us to the moon in the 1960s, here it is. These are the weavings that were done by hand by women in a factory. In a factory, they were recruited from a textile factory. Yeah.
Sonya,
Yeah.
I'm popping back in now. I want to say thank you so much for sharing. I feel like I've just learned from, as many books as I've read about textiles. I've compounded and multiply it many times. So want to say thank you. If you have time, we do have some questions.
Yes. I'm sorry. I thought that I wouldn't have enough, and I had too much, and I went on for far too long. Thank you, everybody, for your patience. If you've still hung in there with me.
Yes. So we have a few questions here. So Robin Johnston, who is the Wiregrass Museum of Art Special Projects Administrator, originally put a question about the soundscape and wanting to hear a little bit more about that, but you've answered that for us, but she left another comment wanting to express how students who have come on the pre-K-12 tours have been commenting that the piece Spider Woman looks like a portal to another world.
Oh, I
So this
love
is a common theme that has come up with students over and over.
I love that. And you said that this is elementary. What
So
age?
yes, pre-K through 12th grade. We've had students of
Oh,
all ages.
amazing. Well, they really kind of they hit it right on the head, didn't they? Actually,
Absolutely.
to me they did. Children
Sonia,
can often see so much.
we're going to give a few minutes if anyone else has a question that they'd like to add. We've got time. You can add that in the Q&A here. I'm curious, and my question for you is, you talk about folklore and folk tales, and you've referenced so many different cultures. Are there any folklore traditions or cultures that you haven't really explored yet that you're interested in and you would like to learn more about?
Yes, so a little bit, but I'm hoping to go to Mexico a couple of times this year, and I think I'll be very busy digging into that. I haven't really spent a lot of time in Mexico thinking about a lot of that since probably 2007 or so. So I'm ready to really do a lot of research and exploration with that. That's just amazingly rich in textile tradition and clay. Oh, and Melissa, can you tell me? I don't see how I can share. Can you see me? Because I can't
I
see
can
me.
see you. Yeah.
You can see me?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, okay, okay. I can't see me at all. I don't know. It's a bit disorienting. Is there a particular button that I can press to so I can?
Um, Perhaps on, if you see view and then my view, should say side by side.
Hmm.
I don't see any more questions coming in our Q&A. Oh, here we go.
Oh, okay.
Oh, so Holly Myers is writing in. She said, I don't have a question, but I want to say I think you are brilliant. Thanks for staying in the South. And I think most of our attendees tonight would echo that. We've just learned so much. I love how you've pulled in so many disciplines and have really pressed deep into your work and shared so much with us. And so I want to echo that as well.
Oh, thank you, Holly. That's a very generous thing to say. I appreciate that. Thanks for having me.
All right, if we have any other attendees with questions, go ahead and leave those now. Oh, wonderful. One more just came in.
Okay,
Shirley
great.
Wilson tonight with us said, what an awesome webinar. One of our students that participated in the 2022 Helen Keller Art Show of Alabama created artwork using sounds. Hope you get to see it there at Wiregrass Museum. Yes, that is a wonderful exhibition that travels across the state. It's currently on view through a few weeks in May in one of our galleries at the museum. And it's so great to hear from you, Shirley. Glad that you could join us tonight.
Great. Yes, yes.
Right, I'm not seeing any other questions, but I would encourage you, if you have one, go ahead and enter that now. Sonya, we've been chatting for the last few hours, and we were joking about how you get to see the sun go down through these virtual artist talks. So they start off with a little bit of brightness, and then by the end of the night, we've got our lights on.
Yeah.
So I again want to just say thank you so much for bringing this exhibition to life. Thank you to Tina and the team at Ava in Birmingham for organizing it and for the curatorial work there. We're so grateful for you sharing with us tonight and sharing your work with the world. And as I'm not seeing any more questions come in, I think that we'll go ahead and close up for the evening. For anyone attending and who's listened in, we will have the recording on this available on the museum's YouTube channel within a couple of days. So if you'd like to share it with friends or go back to reference any certain point, I know that I'm certainly going to go back and look over all of the inspiration photos and video at the beginning. That was very inspiring. So Sonya, thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you to everybody at Wiregrass Museum. It's been a great experience, and I really appreciate everything that you've done. And it was great talking to you tonight.
You
Thank
as well. Hope you have a great weekend, and thanks everyone for joining in.
you. Thank you so much.
Good night.
Good night. Bye.